natin, yung mga kababayan natin, yung mga kameta natin na mas malapit doon sa epicenter, parang bandang Porta Galera yata, no? Base sa alam natin at saka also papuntang Cavite, Batangas, yung mga area niyan. Kasi kami dito sa Manila, mga kameto, talagang na-feel namin yung lindol at ang tagal-tagal niya, no? Sobrang tagal niya, hindi lang malakas pero matagal, no? So biglang parang bumalik yung mga memories natin ng 2019 din, di ba? Naalala ko ng 2019, actually in-interview namin si back then Speaker of the House, former President Arroyo. And then, eto na, tapos na interview. Right after interview, biglang boom, lumindol ng sobrang lakas sa Manila. So, mga kameta, I hope everyone is doing well and being safe as much as possible. Ganito kasi mga kameta talaga, no? Pag mga moments na ganun, you'll realize talaga how vulnerable we are as human beings, no? Sa lahat ng yabang natin, sa lahat ng mga kaiwanan natin, megalomaniac natin, etc., we're nothing, right? We're just, alam niyo naman. So, it's a good dose of humility, no? To be reminded about our vulnerability as human beings. Pero nevertheless, of course, my best wishes for everyone to keep safe. Kaya ang mahalaga mga kameta na maganda yung governance natin. Kasi kung hindi maganda yung governance natin, hindi natin masisigurado na yung urban planning natin ay handa, no? Dun sa mga natural disasters na unfortunately very vulnerable ang Philippines too, no? Whether ito yung climate change or whether ito yung earthquake. So katulad ng pangako natin mga kameta, balikan natin. Actually kahapon I didn't have a chance na to do meta kasi dire-diretso yung trabaho hanggang gabi na. At maraming salamat din dun sa mga kaibigan natin sa Philippine Coast Guard. Boom! For sharing their views on many important issues, especially ukol sa West Philippine Sea. By the way, mga kameta, meron ng mga ano ngayon ha, pwede nang biyahe sa West Philippine Sea. Turista-turista. So baka mamaya, kaysa magkaroon, doon na tayo pupunta mga kameta. Alright. So, excited na ba kayo papunta sa West Philippine Sea? Yun, buya ka siya. Anyway, speaking of the West Philippine Sea, punta natin kaagad yung usapin na yan. Then, balikan natin itong issue ng presidential bill for 2028. Again, I'll explain to you guys why this is important in 2023 to talk about what's happening in 2028. And as you know, this is exactly what we were saying last year pa, na if Tulfo becomes part of the conversation, then potentially that could put Lenny or Riza as the third force. And now, kitang-kita natin dito sa numbers na it's gonna be a very fluid competitive. No more unit team numbers. Alright? Balikan natin yan. But in the meantime, let's go to Senator Bato de la Rosa. Yan. Si Bato, meron na naman intervention. Alright. At least hindi na siya nagmakaawa this time na alam niyo na. Okay. So, Senator Bato, ito pag-usapan natin. So, si Senator Bato ay humingi ng rents dito sa America, dito sa mga bases sila, etc. This got a lot of attention. Very interesting. And then, what made it even more interesting is biglang pumasok pa yung isa. Sino ba yung si Escudero ba? Yan. So, at least we have two senators openly talking about essentially extracting rents from the United States for the Edca sites. Now, let me discuss with you, mga kameta, alright, why napaka-problematic itong mga ganitong interventions. Again, just to be clear, I am 100% for getting the most out of all of our alliances and partnership. I'm not so sure about what's really behind these kinds of interventions, no? And ako, the best way to see if people are really being nationalistic and they're really trying to make the most for the national interest, tignan nyo yung track record nila pagdating sa bullying sa atin na nangyayari sa West Philippine Sea. In short, tignan nyo rin yung mga sinasabi ng mga senators na yan sa China. Ano mga ulit ang comments na yan sa China? Yan, kung sobrang nationalistic ka, patriotic, fighting for the country. Yan. Nasaan na? Hindi ko na malabas yung Ayan. Edca rent. Just to be accurate about this mga kameta, make US pay rent for Edca sites. Alright, saan daw yung principle of reciprocity? Ayan na. Medyo di ba ito yung ito yung nagkaroon ng problema dahil wala ng visa. Ayan, okay. Pag-usapan natin yan. So, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa, nag-reiterate siya ng kanyang concern dun sa possible mass exodus of the military and uniformed personnel amid plans to reform the MUP pension system. So, okay, meron siyang ganon. Pag-usapan natin mamaya itong issue na pension system kasi mahaba-habang lecture yan sa fiscal sustainability, no? Basics yan, pag-usapan natin mamaya yan. Pero ito yung interesting na ako kumuha ng marami attention. Ito yung kanyang proposal, no, na the US should pay rent for enhanced defense cooperation agreement, no, para bayaran yung pension issue ng okay yun na. Sige, kulang tayo dito. Huwag kayong mag-alala. Kuha kami dito. Bigyan namin sa inyo. Ganun lang naman talagang kalakaran nowadays pala. No? So, ito yung sinabi ng ating itong mahal na senador. Sabi niya, why not ask the United States to pay for rent for the sites used for the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement to fund the ballooning pension funds for the military and uniformed personnel? At katulad sinabi ko, of course, pag sinabi mo yun sa US, sabi ng US, yes sir, no problem. Bayaran namin kahit anong gusto nyo. Ganun kasimple lang naman, di ba? Let's amend the provisions of the VFA. We can tell the US to pay the rent for the use of our facilities. Wait lang. Edca, VFA, wait lang. Okay. When Americans come here, they don't ask for a visa, but Filipinos suffer when they... Okay, dito agree ako kay Senator Bato, 100%. Walang reciprocity dyan. Ang hirap kumuha ng visa kung Pinoy ka sa US, considering ito yung former colonizer natin, ito yung Commonwealth tayo before, tapos grabe yung mga pila pag nakita mo sa US Embassy. Yan, dito agree ako 100% sa kanya. Pero siguro naalala rin niya yung visa issue niya. Where is the principle of reciprocity in international relation? There's no reciprocity. Okay, so dito in fairness dito, may point siya. Diba? Pansin nyo pag mag-apply ng US visa, ang haba ng pila, dadaanan kung saan-saan. As if naman meron sa US, diba? Sorry mga kameta, yung mga katulad namin na nakapunta sa mga mas maayos na bansa, diba? Tapos punta ka sa US, yung mga airports, napakaluma, ang gulo ng politika nila, tapos meron pa silang mga Trump, tapos yung mga kalsada, hindi ganun. I mean, guys, no offense, no, but if you've seen, for instance, the highways in Dubai or Doha, no, I'm sorry, yung mga highways sa US mukhang kawawa. If you've seen airports from Istanbul, for instance, yung airports sa US, yung airport sa New York, yung mga ganun, parang kawawa. So, I don't know, yung ibang Pinoy, napaka-impressed sa US, pero honestly, yung mga iba sa amin na, had the privilege of being all around the world and seeing yung mga mas maayos na bansa. Ang layo. Yung autobahns sa Germany, nako po, walang laban dyan ng mga US dyan. So, I don't know, pag sinasabi ng iba na number one, ganyan, parang, number one saan? Diba? Number one sa size and all, sige, given na yan, but, habol lang China dyan. But in terms of quality of infrastructure, I think there's only one area where I think US is really ahead of everyone is educational institutions. I'll give it to them. I think Yale and Harvard and Ivy League schools and Berkeley are still among the best universities on earth. Doon, saludo ako sa US. Pero pagdating sa ibang issue, infrastructure, society, punta ka sa San Francisco, ang dami mga hobos doon. Diba? Grabe. Parang for a country as rich as the United States, for San Francisco, such a well, tapos ganyan. Punta ka sa New York, lalabas ka lang dun sa medyo posh areas na Manhattan kung saan ka mapatpat. May isang beses na kamali tayo. Pagtingin ko, parang ako lang yung di ba? Ako lang naka-French coat or something. And it's like, wait, saan ba tayo, pre? Di ba? Oh, sa lagay ko na yan. I mean, hindi tayo malayo sa 6 foot tall. But I didn't feel safe, And these are even the more wealthy, more developed cities in the US. So, I mean, no offense, mga kameta. But, anyway, so, ipapadaan ka kung para lang kumuha ng visa sa US. Parang, anyway, at least naman, minsan pag binibigyan ng visa sa US for the next 10 years yan. So, madali na yan. But I'm just saying, in fairness kay Bato, may point siya dito. Alright? May point siya dito. So, pero yung idea na i-juice out mong US para bayaran mo yung problema sa pension system, sa military, etc. Like, I'm not sure this works. And let me explain to you why. Alright, balikan natin to So, first of all, let's look at the very text. Let's look at the very text of the Edca, mga kameta. Okay? Basa-basa muna bago mag-comment para ko sinasabi, di ba? Lahat naman tayo nagkakamali. Ako rin nagkakamali minsan. So, ito klarong-klaro mga kameta. So, Article 3, Paragraph 3. Tignan nyo, basahin niyo yan Basahin niyo yan. klarong-klaro sa Edca na nakalagay, given the mutuality of benefits, meaning, ang Amerika ay, at least, base sa kasunduan na yan, tutulungan din ng Amerika ang Pilipinas pagdating sa kanyang training, pagdating sa kanyang AFP modernization, pagdating sa kanyang development ng kanyang defensive capability, deterrence capability. Tsaka the idea is that indirectly, kung mas marami mga kano dyan, mas marami silang mga facilities, that might also make the bullies think twice about making many shenanigans dun sa mga karagatan natin. Right? So, klaro given the mutuality of the benefits, right? Nakalagay, the parties agree that the Philippines shall make agreed locations available to the United States forces, ito, quotation pa, without rental or similar costs. And United States forces shall cover, andun yan, cost. Pero United States forces shall cover their necessary operational expenses with respect to their activities. And so kung may mga operational expenses sila, babayaran ng US yan. Pero walang rental dun sa access. Now, this is very important mga kameta because the last time the Americans were paying rent to us, and this is where I'm gonna say, the rent issue is dangerous, actually not good for us because the last time na nagbayad sila ng rent sa atin, they had permanent access sa ating mga base dyan. Right? And bawal yan. At hindi natin gusto yan. Ayaw na natin ng mga permanent US bases. Katulad ng Cold War period. So the moment na pupunta ka sa rent payment situation, ibang usapan na yan mga kameta, hindi na Edca yan. Medyo bumabalik na tayo dun sa permanent basis na bawal base sa ating saligang constitution. At as I said, eto mga kameta, klarong-klaro yung text ng Edca, Article 3, Paragraph 3, na dapat walang mga rent issue na yan dahil this is supposed to be a rotational access. It's not a permanent access, rotational access. It's a kind of a light footprint access, mga kameta. Alright? This is very important. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on the whole Edca situation. There's a very good article by a good friend of ours, Professor Thayer at New South Wales University, where he explains the circumstances of that. Now, alam natin yung circumstances of that, mga kameta, because as a journalist, aside from an academic, as a journalist, I was covering the evolution of the negotiations. In fact, one of my former professors from UP was, I think, Assistant Secretary for DND back then, who was involved in this negotiation. So, very spirited yung debate nung time ng 2013 to 2014. So, basa tayo. So, etong Edca na po, ito po ay isang produkto ng mahaba-habang negosasyon, right? More than half a dozen rounds based on some of the reports that we saw, mga kameta. You're free to check, for instance, itong napakagandang article from Professor Thayer about the importance of Edca. So, there were multiple rounds, more than a half a dozen rounds of negotiations. At wag natin kalimutan, mga kameta. So, hindi madali gumawa ng mga ganitong kasunduan, no? Mahaba-habang usapan yan. Usually it takes even years. In fact, sometimes revising just the guidelines of a bilateral defense treaty takes years or more. Now, there were by some indication, 7-8 rounds of negotiations, and eventually, ito lumabas itong Edca na yan. And this is where, mga kameta, I do agree, though, with Senator Bato de Rosa na we need more reciprocity and mutuality because, to be honest, siguro next time interview natin ulit yung mga galing sa Aquino administration doon kasi alam niyo naman mga kameta, nung isang araw na interview namin doon sa Real Talk podcast namin, si former Secretary for Political Affairs, si Ronald Llamas. Don't worry guys, lalabas yung full version, production level version soon, God willing, ilalabas namin. But I want to ask also more people who were part of the Aquino administration and who were part of negotiation of this. My sense is, mga kameta, we did not get the best version of the Edca that we could have got. First of all, I'm uncomfortable giving access to foreign troops to our territory. And we don't have a very good history about that. At the same time, there's a reality na kulang tayo sa sariling defensive capabilities at malaking bully dyan. Okay. Having said that, dun sa initial rounds ng Edca, actually, ang pinupush ng Pilipinas, particularly sila, the late, and God bless his soul, Foreign Secretary Albert de Rosario, actually, ang pinupush nila, mga kameta, was A situation whereby in exchange for yung partial access dun sa mga base sa ilalim ng Edca, papalis tayo ng kanilang mga armas. I'm talking about potentially submarines, frigates, some of the advanced weapon systems. Now, why was that the position of the Philippines? That was the position of the Philippines because we were in a desperate situation. Remember mga kameta, we are talking about just months after the Panatag Show crisis. Nawala na po yung Scarborough Shoal sa atin. Kinuha ng China noon, no? So effectively, may de facto control na sila after yung palpak na negotiations na nangyari over the mutual disengagement from that area. Now, I have the version of Philippine Navy on what happened in Scarborough Shoal. For instance, you can check my interview with Admiral Ong dun sa show natin sa One News TV5. I also interviewed folks from the Philippine Coast Guard. You'll see a copy of that soon. So I talked to a lot of people mga kameta, people from different galing sa iba't ibang larangan ng ating gobyerno at ating foreign policy ng panahon na yan. Nevertheless, I think what really is... I also talked to Trillanes, by the way, back in the day, na-interview natin siya. I think this is 2019 na-interview ko siya. You can find it on YouTube. Just put, "Hey, Darian Trillanes," lalabas yan. Makita niyo yung interview na yan. O baka obviously, maraming trolling na nangyari sa atin nun. But, going back to this mga kameta. So, you're talking about Scarborough Shoal. Few months removed from that, desperate ang situation, desperate ang Pilipinas. Sinasabi natin sa mga Amerikano na tulungan nyo kami, please tulungan nyo kami, kailangan namin ng tulong, kailangan namin ng armas kasi hindi kami nirespeto ng China dahil kulang yung aming kakayahan. At parang medyo kulang yung suporta nyo sa amin nung time ng Scarborough Shoal. So ito yung context, no? So kaya nga may back and forth. Ang problema nung time na yan, ang US under Obama, you may love Obama's domestic politics or personality, but as far as support for the Philippines is concerned, talagang kapos. At si Obama, very concerned about engaging China. Umiba lang yan nung panahon ni Trump at saka Biden kasi sila aggressive na sila sa China. Pero nung time ni Obama, gusto pa rin ng US to engage China. Kaya para medyo pinabayaan tayo nung time na yan, di ba? So, hindi sila pumayag because the argument of Obama was, nako, pag pinaliz natin sa mga Pilipino, tapos gamitin nila yan, tapos makipagyera sila sa China para kunin ulit yung Scarborough Shoal, damay-damay na yan. Ayaw namin yan. No. So, a lot of our initial requests, mga kameta, ay tinurn down ng US. So, my understanding here is the final version of the Edca is not 100% what was intended on the part of the Philippines. Now, whether it's 60%, 70%, 40%, we can argue that. We can argue about that. We can debate about that. But I do agree na the EDCA as it stands is not optimal. But it's not also optimal because it was negotiated under circumstances of desperation, and just to blame the Aquino administration for that would be unfair because the Aquino administration inherited a very weak military pagdating sa yung kakayahan natin na sinasabi natin mga kameta. So in short, I agree that EDCA, when it was negotiated a decade ago, was not optimally negotiated. Alright? But, tapos na eh. Na-sign na noong 2014, and then by the way, there was still 2 years left before na klaro ito ng Philippine Supreme Court. So mahaba-habang usapan yan. So essentially, you're looking at 4 years before EDCA became some sort of an operational agreement. Now, wag natin kalimutan mga kameta, ang EDCA po ay executive agreement. It's not ratified by the US and Senate and not ratified by the Philippine Senate. So this is a direct one-to-one negotiations between the executive branch of the Philippines and the US government. So prerogative pa rin ng presidente anong gagawin niya dito. So for instance, paano ni Digong, nalaman natin na si Digong, sabi niya, sige, let's keep the EDCA pero wag natin i-fully implement yan para hindi magalit yung kanyang mga kaibigan sa China, no? And only towards the end of the Duterte administration, nakita natin na may mga efforts na i-fully implement itong EDCA kasi ang idea dyan sa EDCA is gagastos ang Amerika para pagandahin yung ibang sites. Sites lang, literally sites. Walang base, kampo, etc. And then, sana yung presence nila, yung idea was, medyo to deter China. At saka, kasabay ng Edca, tutulungan din nila yung Pilipinas para palakasin yung kanyang kakayahan pagdating sa pagdepensa sa ating karagatan, sa West Philippine Sea, etc. So, yun yung konteksto. Now, nevertheless, of course, hindi lang naman China yung issue sa EDCA. Andun yung counterterrorism, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operations. But two bases sa ilalim ng EDCA 1.0 ay may direct na kinalaman sa West Philippine Sea. Basa Air Base at uh, uh, Bautista Air Base. No? Palawan yung pangalawa, yung isa naman sa Pampanga. Now, just to give you an idea, this EDCA actually nakalutang siya for a while. Etong si Bato, di ba, ano, beshing ni tatay yon, di ba? Or whatever. The thing is, ba't hindi sila nagsalita nung time na andun sila? Sila yung, di ba? So, if you look at it, EDCA projects, ang daming mga delays pa noon ni Digong. So, for instance, ayaw ni Digong na ma-delay, ayaw ni Digong na mag-preposition ng weapon system sa mga Amerikano dyan kasi sabi niya, ito ay medyo delikado, compromising sovereignty natin. Pero alam natin talaga yung totoong reason kasi alam niya na mainis yung China. So, ayaw na magalit yung mga kanyang diba? So, just to give you an idea, so there were a lot of analysis about how the delay in the implementation of EDCA, for instance, was very problematic. So, actually, dahil dun sa opposition ni tatay sa full implementation of EDCA, tuwang-tuwang China doon. Dahil walang masyadong presence ang US dun sa mga base na malapit sa West Philippine Sea. At pangalawa, hindi rin na-fully implement yung mga joint plans na meron ng Pilipinas at US para palakasin yung kapasidad ng yung Armed Forces of the Philippines to be able to withstand modern warfare intimidation from China or gray zone intimidation from China. So, only in 2022 nakita natin na medyo nagki-kick off na yung EDCA projects, meaning actual development of those sites, launching the Philippine-US alliance to score populist points or to make some other people happy, right? So, yun ang point ko eh. Parati ko sinasabi. Now, in fairness kay Escudero naman, medyo strong naman yung stances sa China throughout the years or relatively strong. So, siguro for him talaga, it's a question of making the most out of the relationships and alliances we have. But, yun nga yung mga kameta eh. You cannot just go in and say, ay, ibang gusto namin pa. Ang hirap pag-negotiate ng agreement. At tignan mo, kung yung Amerika naman, bubulin mo yung Amerika na papalitan, like, good luck with that, diba? And don't forget, ang Amerika po ay nag-negotiate ng agreements with multiple countries all around the world. They have basing access, all sorts of similar access, agreements, 100 plus countries around the world, no? Ito yung invisible empire ng United States. So, kung papayag sila na ganyan-ganyan lang sila ng Pinas, ganyan din sila ng iba't ibang bansa, diba? So hindi to, that's what I'm saying, let's be adults here, right? We disagree we can say na hindi optimally negotiated, we work with what we got, or we throw it all out, and then go for a new agreement, but accept all the risks. But, yun dapat ang ginawa ni Digong noon, ba't di niya ginawa? Yung VFA, yung inano niya. Pero yung EDCA, that was a purely executive agreement. He could have got rid of that. So, bakit ngayon lang nangingay itong mga pro-tatay people? So, yun lang point ko ngayon. Alright? So, mga kameta, I'll keep it there because there's a lot that we can discuss about EDCA as more and more details come in. Because hanggang ngayon, hindi natin alam ilan ang mga Amerikano na papasok dun sa mga bases na yun on rotational basis. Hindi natin alam exactly ano yung mga weapon systems na i-proposition nila. So, marami pang bagay na pag-usapan natin. But remember, this is not about permanent bases, mga kameta. This is not about permanent bases. So, idea of, yung rentier style, geopolitics, that's so Cold War. And that implies na may permanent access sila or may parang base leasing agreements sila, which is not the case now. This is a very flexible, light touch kind of agreement. So, it's very different from that. So, actually, it might not help our cause if we try to inject the rent issue. Because kung may pumasok rent issue din, biglang parang, permanent basis ng pinag-usapan natin, leasing talaga all the way. Because the Edca is supposed to just give rotational access, much more light touch. No? Na by the way, hindi pa rin na-finalize because si BBM, katulad ng sinabi natin, over and over again, BBM is not 100% sure kung gusto niya mag-fully align sa US because he doesn't want to burn bridges with China for a whole number of reasons. Alright? Okay, let's park it there muna, yung issue na EDCA na yan. Balikan natin soon. But I just had to emphasize, ano yung text of the agreement, what were the circumstances of the agreement, and what are the implications of the agreement, and what are the implications of asking for revision of the agreement. And fifth, actually they could have kicked the agreement out of the window noong time ni Digong, pero hindi nila ginawa. So bakit ngayon sila nag-iingay? Alright, connect the dots yourself. Now, let's go to another important topic, mga kameta. And this is the topic of the future of Philippine politics. So yung mga amateurs, they would think the Philippine politics is like family X, family Y, junior of family X, junior of family Y, third of family X. I mean, like, they have no idea of contingency. They have no appreciation of unpredictability. They have no appreciation of rivalries within ruling coalitions, etc. So, at now, exactly katulad ng sinabi natin, mga kameta. Last year pa lang, sabi ko, yes, tapos ng laban the moment na nagsama ang House of Duterte, House of Marcos. There was just no way for Lenny or anyone to really defeat them because nagsama yung dalawa, it became essentially a majoritarian coalition. Kaya ang taas ng nakuha ng votes ni Marcos Jr. because that's also a vote that was for Sara and vice versa. So them getting 60% or more than 50% was not totally out of this world because nagsama yung dalawa. So Lenny was essentially against two candidates at once. She got 15 million votes, which is not too different from the number of votes that Pinoy and Duterte got when they became presidents. Except Pinoy and Duterte were not against combined houses. Had something like that happen, who knows? Baka hindi na nanalo sila Pinoy or hindi na nanalo si Digong. Digong got under 40% votes, Aquino got 40% of the votes. Pero naging majoritarian base dahil yung kila unit team dahil nagsama yung dalawang malaking higanteng pamilya. But I always said the picture is going to be quite different once the rubber hits the road because then we're talking about real politics, no? During election period, you can say a lot of things, you can be very nice, etc. At noon pa lang panahon ng elections, sabi natin, bantayin natin yung cabinet appointments kasi doon natin makita yung lay of the land and the configurations. At nakita natin immediately, Marcos made it clear, I'm the president. I have the final prerogative on who becomes the defense secretary, for instance. Or, for Speaker of the House. Maybe I want my cousin to be there, someone I can trust and all. I'm not sure about the other people. So, noon pa lang nakita natin, mga kameta, just days after the victory of Marcos Jr., nakita natin the unit team was perhaps not as unit team as some people wanted it. Or it was a unit team on Marcos terms. Now, we also said, mga kameta, na there's not only one person, but one force, one pole of politics to watch out for. Noong time na hindi pa siya ganun ka-clear. Pero now it's becoming very clear. I'm talking about the Tulfo pole in Philippine politics. Now, I'm thinking about writing an essay, proper essay about it, and then let's see later on, siguro interview natin sila, Senator Rafi, or na-interview ko na si Erwin, di ba, last year, nag-ano na kayo. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, etc. Now, the Tulfos were friends with the Dutertes. They're also now friends with Marcos. But they're actually their own force. They're an independent force on their own. And nakita natin, Rafi Tulfo, until the last moment, was number one for the Senate. And usually, if you're number one in the Senate race, you're in a good position to run for the higher office, including the presidency. No? Now, Rafi ended up number two. But we see over the next year, since he became the senator, he clearly is effectively like the senior senator, the most prominent senator, and dun sa mga surveys nakita natin, the most popular senator. by far. No one comes even close, right? Now, we saw also the latest surveys, mga kameta, right, which show that, in fairness, Lenny has a good chance if she wants to run for Senate. A number of many people from the opposition have a good chance to run for Senate. Tatay Digong may have a very good chance of becoming senator if he wants to run for Senate. But actually, the ones who's gonna top the Senate race, and get 23, 24 million votes, whatever, it's another Tulfo, Erwin Tulfo, who's right now a congressman, and who I believe as a DSWD secretary did pretty well. Again, just to be very clear, I'm not fan of the trial by publicity, the Tulfo style of justice, etc. throughout the years. I mean, I've had my own reservations about it, but at the same time, I'm someone who's fair, someone who's objective. If you do something good, I'll give you credit, and I think if you look at Senator Erwin Tulfo, I think he did a very good job as a DSWD secretary. And as far as Senator Rafi Tulfo is concerned, he also has done a very good job on multiple fronts. Hindi siya opposition, but there were times that he very much reinforced and echoed the concerns of oppositions, including concerns raised by Riza Hontiveros, whether dun sa national grid natin na masyadong malaki influence ng China, whether sa land grabbing issue natin, whether even sa Marlica issue na paggamit sa SSS pension fund. Hindi siya opposition, so he's not gonna say totally no to everything that Marcos or the key legislative priorities of Marcos, but he stood his ground, and I think many people began to really appreciate what he brings to the table. And then dun sa sugar importation, smuggling, dun sa maraming kalokohan na nangyari, nakita natin na Senator Rafi Tulfo very much shed light on yung mga kalokohan na nangyari sa loob ng gobyerno and beyond. Now, if you look at the survey on SWS, number 1 ranked, Erwin Tulfo, 32% of the votes, that means close to 24 million votes in quantitative terms. If he were to run today, if the elections were held today, he could expect up to 24 million votes. Number 1, ahead of Digong, ahead of Pia Cayetano, ahead of Bongo, ahead of Pacquiao. Now, we know that there's a non-aided survey version whereby Pacquiao actually comes on top, but Erwin Tulfo is still more or less within top 5. So that just tells you how influential they are. Now, we can see, I doubt Jojo Marbina is going to run again. I'm not very sure about that. I'm not sure about Lito Lapid too. I'm also not sure about Vico Soto. So Vico Soto also is pasok siya dun sa Magic 12. But I'm not sure he's gonna. I think he wants to do the 3 terms, consolidate, and then move on to the next. Potentially even as a congressman, because that way he can better protect yung legacy niya by supporting and literally protecting his folks in the government, because alam niya naman yung situation dun sa Pasig, diba? But you can see Mar Rojas, Lenny Robredo, etc., they're just at the tip of the Magic 12, right? Not too far from Bong Revilla, from Isko Moreno, etc. So it's quite interesting. So a lot of opposition figures, in fact, Lenny or Mar Rojas even ranks higher than Gatchalian, right? And some of the incumbents, way higher than Francis Tolentino, another incumbent, right? Way higher than Ralph Recto, for instance, right? So this is a quite an interesting, fluid, competitive situation. Riza Hontiveros doesn't need to run because she just won last year, so she'll be there safe until 2028. No, so there is very good chance of multiple opposition candidates getting into Magic 12 for the next elections 2025. But again, aided and non-aided, Erwin Tulfo is very much almost sure shot siya to be in the Magic 12, and he has probably more than 50% chance to even top the race, especially if Digong doesn't run. And I won't be surprised if even Manny Pacquiao may reconsider things, right? But looks like Manny Pacquiao wants to come back. And then base sa alam ko, parang there are even discussions about a Manny Pacquiao-Tulfo kind of a team-up down the road. Especially if Tulfo is doing better in the surveys back then maybe Manny Pacquiao can be the vice presidential candidate of Tulfo. So very interesting. Very interesting dynamics we're seeing. Now, obviously, maraming pwede mangyari before now and then, no? But what I'm saying, mga kameta, is as early as now nakikita natin na yung 60% majoritarian unit team base, hindi natin siya nakikita. Because Sara got 28%, which is good, puts her ahead of everyone else. But this is barely a third of the total vote. And that tells you vast majority of the voters are still open to other options. And Tulfo comes second, but with the margin of error 3 to 5%, he could also be tied with Lenny Robredo. And this is exactly what we said before. Tulfo coming into the race not only makes it difficult for Sara to have this easy and essentially seamlessly, but this also opens up the space for third candidates, in particular from the progressive opposition, like Lenny Robredo or Riza Ontiveros, whoever between them wants to run. I'm just surprised lang nilagay si Sandro doon, considering Sandro will not be 40 years old or more by 2028. I don't know. But anyway, pwede natin pag-usapan yan. And let me be absolutely clear, I will rather check SWS than Google Trends or whatever, right? Okay, let's be very honest about it. Sorry na lang sa mga friends natin na Google Trends. Now, these are the things I'm going to look at. They're not perfect, but we're going to triangulate them. Now, we saw actually, dun sa a little bit less credible online survey na ginawa earlier this year, ganun din ang lumabas. Sara on top, Tulfo, and then one of the opposition candidates potentially there in the mix for third, Risa or Lenny, etc. So we can see that the surveys are actually showing a similar trend line here. Now, this is 2023, so many things can change until 2028. But what I'm saying is, by many accounts, the Tulfos could be a really independent pole of power in the Philippines. And that is actually also a good thing for the opposition because it makes it sure, because it ascertains the fact that there's no longer a unit team rallying behind a potential Sara presidential run. So, fluid, dynamic, competitive, very interesting. Very interesting. Now, if your expectation of what could happen in 2028 is changing, now, ay hindi na ako sure na ito manalo, that also affects how you interact with these peoples as early as now. So in game theory, it's called shadow of the future. So for instance, if you think China is the next superpower in the 10 years, ngayon pa lang, tataya ka na sa China. Pero kung biglang malaman mo, ay hindi pala ganun kalakas ang China, yung economy ng pababa, ay hindi, medyo doon na tayo sa US pa rin, di ba? Parang ganon ang calculation, shadow of future, right? It's exactly the same when it comes to domestic politics, mga kameta. So expectations about what could be the lay of the land come 2025, 2026, 2028, it's going to impact the kind of coalitions, realignments, and the political capital of key figures in Philippine politics as early as now. All right? Now, we had an article on Nikkei Asia just the other day looking at how China, the China factor, explains a lot of realignments and internal fault lines we're seeing as far as the ruling coalition is concerned. Pag-usapan natin separately yan. But today, more or less, we covered two topics. So, bumawi ako for kahapon na I was not able to join you guys due to other commitments. All right? Maraming salamat mga kameta, and thank you very much, and God bless you.